So here's what we're going to do in the next 30 seconds. We're going to have some really quick announcements. We're going to have a quick sort of called break where we do 5 minutes of bathrooming, cleanup, and stuff like that. And then we are going to recombine into groups that are perhaps similar but slightly different than the ones we have right now. Before we do that, though, I want to have a quick readout of where people were in these last sessions at sort of the keyword level. So we're going to basically ask the collaboration group, give me some like basic headlines of stuff you guys talked about. Not so much like at the, and then we talked about this, but it was very complicated because of that. And then some other people suggested this. Not so much that, just say like, hey, we talked about online platforms and why they sometimes don't work. And then we talked about whatever. So we're going to do that now. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back, and then we're going to launch into the new groups and what people want to do next. The invitation that all of you have is an opportunity to stand up and say, I really want to have a conversation about something really specific. Hopefully drawing on what you've already talked about, and perhaps being just a conversation, perhaps being a, let's get people who want to take action on whatever. That'll happen after the break, so you have some time to talk and think. And if you see somebody that you say, hey, you should really be talking about this, encourage them to like stand up and make that invite. Because what we're going to do is break into groups again, but hopefully even smaller, more specific, sort of more team-oriented to really like help people move their ideas along from germination to let's actually implement something that makes people's lives better. So, announcements first, and then we'll do readouts from the groups. The only one I've got is that if we get all the food trash picked up during this break, there's trash cans up here, so like scour everything so that this place is lovely and not full of whatever. That's it. Anything else? No. Okay. So let's go and have readbacks. Collaboration group. You want to fire off? Anybody?
I'll take the bullet.
Okay.
We talked about different problems with collaboration between nonprofits and tech people and the methods in which we use to do both. Do we need a brand new tool that kind of has everybody's talents all listed that nonprofits can go to, or do we need to use the tools that we already have in order to kind of, because everybody has networks, to kind of connect all the networks together? Is this more of a social problem in which, you know, it's not necessarily a tech solution, but just getting everybody into the same room so that they know about each other, so that whenever they are ready to have a tech solution, they know who to call.
Cool. So be thinking about follow-ons. Anybody else wants to do something with that? Think about that. Let's do work. Thank you, group. Yay! And I'll give the group a chance. Did you miss anything that you wanted included? Shout-outs quickly. Beer.
Oh, beer.
Keywords, beer.
Keyword beer. Okay. Not sure where that's going, but I like it. Let's go data group.
Data group, we were chatting with the CTO and CDO for City of Chicago, and basically one of the first fundamental things that we were talking about was how do you report in requests? How do you get your requests into the people that are actually producing the data sets and making them available externally? While there are a few different ways to do it, Chicago CDO on Twitter is the easiest way to contact them and let them know about something that might be broken, something that you notice has changed, or specific requests. That's not the preferred method. They have a form and whatnot that you can go to online, but use the Twitter account. The second thing we looked at was, you know, while we can dream about what we would like to do in the future, in the year, in the months that are coming, what's available right now? What's being underutilized? Chicago CDO was specifically talking about the crime data and the fact that it went back to 2001, and the fact that everybody just wants to report on what is available right now, or what's happened right now, but they're not looking at the transformation of the city as a whole through the various data sets that go back 10 years. So we were looking at depth of data, and then what's currently there right now, and then also the fact that they're using Socrata. We were digging into gem sets and whatnot, and various other programming languages that have step-by-step tutorials on how to extract from that. So that was basically what we were doing in the data.
Cool. Be thinking about if we want to do a follow-up conversation where that might hook in, and talk to those folks during the break. Anyone else in data? Did you miss anything that you want in? No.
We were also talking about holes in data and the way that data
Cool.
has problems.
Flaws in data sets. Good. Let me go transit. Where are you?
Sure, right here. We talked about a lot of big picture ideas around community engagement and connections, bringing in revenue for the CTA, better transit in general. But then we also narrowed down to a few specific ideas of ways that we can really be innovative with open data in making our transit system better. So we talked about things like crash data, and Stephen demoed an app that he's working on around really mapping out where there are a lot of accidents and injuries around the city of Chicago. We talked about potholes and quick ways to note where potholes exist. And then we also talked about expanding that to safety reporting in train stations in general. We talked about an idea for adopting a train station, kind of like the adopt a sidewalk thing. And we also talked about ways to map and make available information about congestion on buses and trains.
Cool. Transit people, anything else you want to chip in?
Yes, by congestion on buses and trains, we mean the people congestion on the bus and the train, where the train has to bypass or leave you at the station, and the bus has to leave you at the bus stop.
Gotcha. So overuse.
Yeah.
Okay. Be thinking about next steps, and if you want somebody to say, hey, can you demo that again, or that sort of thing, make those connections and try to make it happen during the break, and then we'll come back and do those. Let's go land use.
All right, so with land use, the overarching understanding from us is land use is a variety of things, from vacant land use, vacant land revitalization, vacant building revitalization, and storefront revitalization. All that encompasses how do we ultimately want to create healthy communities and neighborhoods, where that ties back into how do we find ways to revitalize those previous places. Is first we need to find out who owns it. So using data to aggregate information, so we find out who owns those vacancies. So, and then also using data and examples of other revitalization efforts within Chicago and also nationally, so you could use that as examples and leverage to help either acquire or retrofit those buildings. As it went further, is we talked about models of sustainability. How do you sustain a new endeavor, a new building, a new community garden, all the way up to a new business? You need all these other pieces of information and overlap, from data to collaboration. And so at the end of our conversation, what we were looking at is we were challenging ourselves and also the other groups to think of their main topic and theme with the underlying parallel of how does this impact starting a small business or an operation, because that's the true sustainability to communities is creating sustainable business models, and transit impacts that. How do you get people to your business? How do you get bike paths to your business? You know, how do you get participation? How do you share the data of other community organizations or other business models? And how do you get, you know, idea makers and entrepreneurs hooked up with banks, financiers, venture capitalists, and everything like that? So it feels like that business model starts to tie it all in, which then get plugged into the vacancies in our city.
Cool. Very cool. Anyone from transit, or I'm sorry, land use, chip in any missed issues? No? Okay, great. That was a very thorough, excellent report back. Thank you. So be thinking about next steps, and if there's anything that you heard of and you want to see more of, feel free to jump on them and ask for them to continue a conversation. Groups, who hasn't gone? Back here?
Yeah.
Education.
Education, please.
Sure. So we started out by talking about how do we develop technological skills within young people to become entrepreneurs, and ended on what a huge barrier the Chicago public school system is for connecting groups who are doing this type of work so that we can actually teach them those skills. So those were the two major things. But we touched on, you know, how do we connect young people? How do we market to young people this idea of increasing their coding and technological skills? We have great organizations who are doing that work, but the Chicago public school system is such a huge bureaucracy that sometimes it's easier to go to one school directly rather than trying to create like some systemic way to partner up. Or maybe it's better to just go with private organizations or charter schools, or even go to other cities to partner up. So what's some way that we can match up people who have these skills, organizations who have these skills, to schools and integrate it into the system, or do we need to create something completely outside of the system to make it so that the Chicago Public Schools reaches out to what we have created, and maybe that's an easier process than if we try to make the school system create some type of RFP process. Maybe we need to create something greater outside of that to so that it's just easier to bypass the bureaucracy.
Cool, very cool. Education people, anyone else want to chip in with other keywords? No? Good quality education from the report back. Thank you. I hope we get a next step session out of that somehow, so please be thinking about that. Other groups, I think participation. Did they go?
Yeah.
You went? Okay. Did anybody get
it?
it? You didn't go yet. Thank you. Go ahead.
We ended up talking about infrastructure and participation together since. Do you mind talking about infrastructure if you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. So participation, kind of the keywords we talked about is trying to get a sense of ownership, getting people, making it something like an invitation, a diversity of invitations. So, you know, everybody is in their own place at some time. So an invitation can't just be one thing, it has to be broad and keep going on. We talk about infrastructure as participation. You can't participate unless you have access. So accessibility is also something we talked about. I know I'm missing like several other things. One of the things we talked about. Anybody else? My mind's blanking right now.
Community-wide broadband was one thing, or like community-wide internet access was a good provide.
It's definitely in the middle of the participation infrastructure diagram. Good job there.
Creating meaningful ways to participate for people who aren't necessarily participating in ways that are normally considered participation.
Bringing things down to a local level, down to all of the office, allowing neighborhoods to participate through that way, just kind of travel up towards City Hall.
Cool. I would love to see some follow-on sessions around maybe community access to broadband, and perhaps on the how do we do events like this with more population, perhaps merge in with other forms of organizing. There was some really good conversation about that. Yeah, that I think would be awesome. But what we're going to do right now, are there any groups that didn't go? No. Okay, what we're going to do right now is one, say thank you to Dragonfly, yay for lunch. If anyone has food needs that didn't get met, talk to somebody in Code for America jacket. That is not me. But it looks like people are fat and happy, so that's good. Clean up your stuff. We're going to break for 15 minutes. We're going to come back, be thinking about what you would propose for a next step, slightly more specific session. You have tons of resources in this room. This is your chance to be a little bit selfish and get stuff started that you want to start. So we'll be back here in 15 minutes. Enjoy.